Hello everybody, and today we will be breaking down the Star Wars Iceberg. I've been wanting to do alternative icebergs from the main conspiracy one for a while, especially as hard as research is getting for that one, and I came across this one, and I'm a super huge nerd for Star Wars, so I thought this would be fun. This iceberg comes from Cinedaria45 on Reddit, who a big thank you for making this, and I also kind of goofed. I saw the picture and then went and researched everything, and then when I came back to the original picture to save it, I looked at the top comment and they had a laid out list of what everything means, so I played myself. However, a couple of them that I had absolutely no idea what I was talking about, I used that comment in order to figure out everything. So thank you, Cinedaria, for helping me fill in the gaps that I didn't even need to start filling in the first place. This iceberg covers everything from canceled projects to behind the scenes production to hidden lore elements and things such as. As a side note, a deeper dive on the Denver airport will be out soon, since that's the one that the Patreon picked. Ken, thank you all for that. As well as the continuation of the main conspiracy iceberg. We've got a lot to cover, so we'll go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. We begin with our first tier, which is Blue Skies, and the first theory, Darth Jar Jar. This is rather well known at this point, but there is a considerable theory that in the prequel trilogy, George Lucas' original plan was for Jar Jar Binks to come out as Palpatine's assistant or second Sith. However, due to the fan outrage that came after The Phantom Menace, which was everyone hated Jar Jar, he decided to replace Jar Jar with a new character, which became Count Dooku. R5-D4, or Red as Luke called him, was the droid originally picked over R2 in the original movie A New Hope. It's later revealed in the comics that R2 communicated to Red that he was on an important mission, and Red self-destructed in order to let R2 go with Luke. So there's a little movie trivia for you. Han Shot First is the now famous example of the Star Wars movie reworks. In the original cut, Han Solo takes the shot at Greedo without Greedo retaliating back. However, after the initial movie's rise to success, they decided to make Han look more of a good guy in the first film, so they edited it to where Greedo shoots first, Han gently dodges before killing Greedo. This has been argued by everyone for taking away character development and yada yada yada. A bunch of people don't like it, and we're going to get more into the reworks in a bit. Jedi census refers to the fact that on nation censuses every year there are several people who list their religion as Jedi, and while this rarely goes over 1%, it gets pretty close. Jay Campbell was the author of the book The Hero of a Thousand Faces, which explains the basic hero's journey that is now mostly known throughout media. George Lucas directly cited this book as giving him the inspiration to write Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. Palpatine killed Padme is in reference to the fact that if Palpatine sat under Darth Plagueis and was able to manipulate midichlorians to control life, that as Anakin was dying, he siphoned those essentially life force away from Padme and into Anakin, both taking out Padme so that Anakin wouldn't be distracted as Darth Vader, and making sure that his apprentice lived on. Also, keep that whole midichlorian control thing in mind. It's going to come back in a minute. Boba Fett killed Owen and Beru is in reference to the idea that Luke's aunt and uncle was killed by the bounty hunter Boba Fett. The reasoning behind this is that whenever we come across Luke's aunt and uncle, they seem to be burned to death. Now, the only character in the entire original trilogy that's seen using anything like that is Boba Fett with his flamethrower. Also, we know that the Empire was using Boba Fett to carry out these bounties, so it's not a far stretch to say that he is, and I also like this theory as it makes the plot more closely tied together. E.T. connection is in reference to the fact that in Phantom Menace, if you look down in the audience, you can see a group in the Senate is the aliens from E.T., implying that E.T. is canon in the Star Wars universe. Obi and Padme refers to the theory that Obi-Wan and Padme had a slight love interest throughout the movies, and that may be part of the reason that Anakin went to the dark side in fear that his own master had betrayed his love interest. Evidence from this can be seen in the way that Obi-Wan treats Padme after Anakin goes to the dark side, and some theories go all the way to say that Luke is Obi-Wan's child, which, yeah, no. We are now reaching the tip of the iceberg. Vietnam War analog refers to the fact that as George Lucas was writing the original drafts for Star Wars, the Vietnam War was going on, and if you think of the story as rebels fighting a galactic empire, it mirrors the Viet Cong fighting American forces. Even more so, this goes further and says that the Ewoks battle on Endor and their guerrilla fighting style is a direct homage to the Vietnam War itself. Obi-Wan is in reference to the fact that upon the prequel's original release, there were some outlets that incorrectly put Obi-Wan as Obi-Wan. This has been adapted into a theory that young Obi-Wan was killed at some point, and Qui-Gon, the person that we later learn is responsible for the cloning process on Kamino, had Obi-Wan be cloned and his memories of being a clone erased. This even explains why in Attack of the Clones, the people at Kamino were so friendly of Obi-Wan and willing to show him the entire procedure. Plagueis creation was for a long time the most popular theory when it came to where Anakin came from. If Plagueis can induce midichlorians in order to both make and destroy life, then the popular theory of where Anakin came from is that his mother Shmi was influenced by these midichlorians in order to become expectant with the Chosen One, which, given how Plagueis' apprentice Palpatine later sort of brought Anakin under his wing in order to become Darth Vader, it makes sense and that this was all planned from the start. The Black Angel is in reference to a short film that was aired in the UK before the premieres of The Empire Strikes Back that was completely lost up until 2011. Cokenails is in reference to the fact that in Return of the Jedi, you can see Carrie Fisher's hand on Han's shoulder and what seems to be a very apparent cokenail. Carrie Fisher has admitted since that during the time of filming of Return of the Jedi that she was on coke, so it stands to reason that this one's probably true. Rey is Shmi is a very convoluted process that will be explained later in the Iceberg, but it's basically the idea that after the events of the new sequel trilogy, that Rey goes back in time, again through means I'll explain, and becomes Shmi, the mother of Anakin, and that the entire timeline of the 9 movies is one continuous loop that keeps resetting on itself. Turkish Star Wars is in reference to this thing, which is exactly what it sounds like. Turkey made a very bootleg copy of Star Wars that was aired in the UK as a sort of joke film. We are now moving into the shallow waters. Extended editions are rebel propaganda is in reference to the fact that every Star Wars movie from the original trilogy as we know now has been altered and edited in some way from the original. These edits include things such as Han being more of a good guy, there being more Empire for the rebels to fight against, and generally cleaning up the look of the films. Therefore, all renditions to the movie that came after the original have been made to make the rebels in a more positive light, i.e. propaganda. Aragon Connections is just in reference to the fact that the book series Aragon took inspiration from Star Wars, all the way down to specific characters just being different versions of characters from Star Wars. Solos About Lucas is in reference to the fact that Ron Howard has always been great friends with George Lucas, to the point that during the filming of Solo, he had him on set to give advice and things like that. Details of this come down to the idea of Han Solo being a racer, and then getting mixed into an in crowd, and then thinking about joining the military, and other minor details of George Lucas's life that essentially paint the movie as a homage for Ron Howard's friend George Lucas. Escape from Dagu was supposed to be a book about Shak Ti and her adventures on the planet of Falut, whatever the one with the weird mantis things was. The book was cancelled for unknown reasons. However, theory persists that it accidentally called out some of the events later in the Star Wars series, such as Palpatine having a granddaughter and whatnot. 1313 was a video game that was very late into production before Disney acquired LucasArts. Followed Boba Fett on the city of Coruscant, where you would play as a bounty hunter in an open world title. The game was going for a hard M rating and was supposed to be a very brutal adaptation of Star Wars, which is why most believe that Disney scrapped it whenever they came on board, because they wanted to obtain a more family-friendly thing. And honestly, this was the one event to me that made me lose all faith in anything Disney did with Star Wars, because I really wanted to play this game. Indoor Calvary is in reference to the thing that happened at the end of... what was the name of the last movie? The Rise of Skywalker, yeah, that thing. Where the group of rebels on Endor ride real-world horses on the ship, which raises a ton of questions, like why do they have horses? Did the Ewoks teach them to ride horses? Where are the Ewoks? Why aren't they helping? Why are there horses on Endor? So if this is considered canon, then that means Ewoks have horses, which... Moving on. Mount Sorrow in the Star Wars comics is a mountain on the moon Endor, which at the top of it there is a sentient talking rock. So yeah, however the Force explains that one. Jabba the Hutt human is in reference to the fact that in the original New Hope, Jabba the Hutt was not yet decided to be a giant slug monster, but just a regular person. There still exists some reels of the test footage of this scene in which Han is talking to just a regular dude, which in post-production they edited over with the Jabba the Hutt that we know today. Chewbacca's Sasquatch is from the comic Into the Great Unknown. In it, Han and Chewbacca crash on planet Earth some 200 years ago, and after Han is killed by Native Americans, Chewbacca gets away. A few hundred years later, Indiana Jones, yes, another Harrison Ford character, shows up and finds Han's body while in search for Bigfoot, which it is said that Bigfoot as we know him in our world is just Chewbacca running around on Earth. The Force Awakens Dark Side of the Moon is in reference to the fact that if you watch The Force Awakens and play the Dark Side of the Moon album by Pink Floyd, specifically 3 times in a row, it lines up as a perfect soundtrack to the events on film. Clone Wars Lost Episodes is exactly what it says. Due to the Clone Wars being canceled earlier than originally predicted, there exists 4 half-finished episodes that would have explained more of the plot going forward that still exist as half-finished productions that you can find online. Now that we are done with the shallows, we move into the murky waters. Trade Federation Star Trek is saying that the Trade Federation that is primarily seen in The Phantom Menace is a parody of the Star Trek crew, down to their outfits and ships and all of that. Naboo ducks is referring to in The Phantom Menace. You can clearly see a shot of what appear to be ducks in around the palace of Naboo, which, going by convergent evolution and the idea that higher life forms will always evolve to that no matter the circumstances, ducks are a higher order being that will always exist through evolution as a chief life form. I am somehow more okay with the ducks than I am the horses. Force Awakens abortion, I spent way too long trying to find, and after going back and reading the comments on the original post, it's just a joke, so you got me. Star Wars City 1985 is in reference to a Canadian film that came out in 1985 that was called Star Wars City. What's interesting is there are absolutely no pieces of this movie still in existence, no one can find any trailers or information, and even the IMDb page doesn't know what the plot is. There is one person who claims to have seen it, although they can't remember what it's about, and other people claim to remember what it's about, but they haven't seen it, and everyone has conflicting information of it being everything from a documentary to a TV show about children going to Mars, so whatever. Annie's real father can refer to many different theories about who Anakin's real father is. However, as it was shown in the Star Wars Legend comics, thanks Disney for taking those out of canon, Palpatine, not Plagueis, induced the midichlorians in the air in order to make Anakin manifest as Shmi's child. Therefore, Palpatine created Anakin in order to use him to take over the galaxy, which, to be fair, totally worked for a while. First script is speaking about the original script for the original Star Wars movie went under several rewrites before the edition that we know came out. All the way from it originally being about a race of warriors on a far-off planet, certain elements were pulled out and used later, such as the name Anakin, and even the name Starkiller, which was the original substitute for Skywalker, which was later used in the Force Unleashed video games. The Overlords is a concept from a Lewis C. Clark novel that was later used in an episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars to speak about the greater overarching beings that control the Force. However, in the original New Hope, George Lucas took inspiration from the Lewis C. Clark novel, and supposedly, by this theory, the creatures that control all of the Force were in the Cantina in A New Hope, meaning they've been watching over the events of the series all the way from the beginning. Gay clones is in reference to the fact that clones would either have to be gay or asexual, seeing that there is no offspring or stories of them becoming families except for a couple in the TV series, meaning that none of them ever took the time to have children, which they were in the middle of a war. That's the point. Also, another theory that I found while researching this is that if any clones did express any tendencies that they would be exterminated in order to keep order within the clone trooper army, which adds another layer of lore to the cloning process on Kamino. World Between the Worlds was an episode of the Star Wars series Rebels. In it, a character discovers that there is an area within the Force that lets you move through time and different areas in space and time in order to manipulate its outcome. Therefore, the Force itself is sort of a fourth dimensional being that does not interact with time. This also gives the idea that highly trained Force users would be able to manipulate time itself, or at least travel around in it. This is the explanation to the theory I mentioned earlier that Rey would be Shmi, Anakin's mother. That either she went back in order to create the Chosen One, or Palpatine, wanting to reset the cycle, so to speak, put her back in time as Shmi. We are now into the deep water. Four Shots has two different theories behind it, one of which being the reason that the super accurate stormtroopers miss all their shots in the series is because the Force is willing it to do so in order to keep our main characters safe. The other one that I like more because it's much more crazy is that Owen and Beru fake their deaths, which is Luke's aunt and uncle, on Tatooine, don stormtrooper armor, and throughout the series were following Luke around, purposefully making bad decisions so that he could get away. Also, I hate that this one is L plus L equals R. I couldn't find anything until I found the original post, so thanks for not spelling this out, I guess. What it's saying is that Luke plus Leia equals Rey, saying that Rey is the illegitimate child of Luke and Leia. And I don't want to talk about this anymore. Let's move on. Boba Fett is Luke's mother. Comes from during the filming of the original trilogy. Mark Hamill went to George Lucas and saying that since Boba Fett's really cool and hasn't done a lot, wouldn't it be really cool if it came out that he was Luke's mother, or what we would later know as Padme, in disguise this entire time? And George Lucas did not like that idea one bit. Reformation Parallels is actually a very in-depth theory that the prequel trilogy is symbolism for the Protestant Reformation. This goes really deep, from everything that Count Dooku is Martin Luther to certain acts that were seen during the Reformation are mirrored in Star Wars, and it's a fun theory that you can check out if you want to. But too much for me to get into right now. C-3PO Venus card refers to, in 1977, there were trading cards made of the Star Wars characters. During the photo shoot for each of the characters for these cards, someone on set thought it would be funny to take a piece of the armor and line it up to look like this. However, it got sent to the toy company along with everything else, and either as a sick joke or they just didn't notice, it got put onto thousands and thousands of trading cards. So many so that when they reproduced them with a different image, there were more that were printed like this than there was of the corrected one. So good job, boys. Luke, with two U's, is a clone in the Star Wars Legends comics that was cloned from the hand that Luke lost fighting Darth Vader on Cloud City Bespin. That clone was trained to be a Sith apprentice and used the lightsaber that Luke also lost in that fight, and was later killed by Leia during a battle because at the time, Luke had taught Leia to be a Jedi. And things like this make me wish that this was the sequel trilogy we got. And moving on, Christmas in Lore Revelations, which we'll talk about the Star Wars Holiday Special in a second, but refers to a Bon Jovi and Star Wars crossover album, which several times references Christmas directly, which means that Christmas is canon in the Star Wars universe, which means Christ would be canon. And yeah, there's a lot of these, just hold on. Original sequel plans refers to the fact that during the filming of the original trilogy, Lucas not only had plans for the prequel trilogy he eventually made, but a sequel trilogy. In it, the original plot was going to be that the Emperor did survive, and he was the main antagonist for the trilogy. During this time, Luke trains Leia to be a Jedi, and in a fight between the two of them and the Emperor, Luke eventually dies, and Leia becomes the leader of the Jedis. Which, again, we were so close. Mandalorian G's is in reference to the fact that in the Mandalorian TV show, a character says G's, which is an abbreviation of Jesus, implying again that Jesus is canon in the Star Wars mythos. Yeah, we are now down to the bottom of the iceberg. Mad Magazine Timeline Predictions is speaking of an article in Mad Magazine that came out in 1982. Making fun of the Star Wars saga for starting in the middle, it begins to make jokes predicting what's going to happen in the prequels and what's going to happen later on, and surprisingly got a lot right by accident, such as Luke and Leia being related, Darth Vader being the previous leader of the Jedi, or at least a high-ranking Jedi, all the way to the Emperor's grandkids being a character. Kashyyyk versus Kazook. So the Star Wars Holiday Special was an absolutely cursed abomination that should never exist, that was made immediately after A New Hope, and it's terrible. Don't watch it. It centers around Chewbacca's family celebrating a holiday known as Light Day, which is a very blatant tie-in with Christmas. However, as Star Wars fans know, the planet that Wookiees come from is Kashyyyk. However, in the special it's called Kazook, which I know it's just because they were dumb and didn't think what they were doing at the time. But that implies there's 2 Wookiee planets and that everything is a crazy Wookiee psyop, so that's cool. Solo's hell, again tying back to Christianity and all that, is because in Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo says the phrase, "I'll see you in hell," and in the Solo movie, he says the phrase, "What the hell?" This means canonically that there is a hell in the Star Wars universe, as well as the Jesus and Christmas, as we've already stated, which I'm not sure how I feel about any of these implications. Mortis is a sort of reality that exists outside of reality within the Star Wars universe, and is supposed to be the birthplace of the Force itself. The Overlords episode of the Clone Wars that I mentioned earlier actually takes place on Mortis between the original founders of the Force, so while it may be well known now, it's still an interesting way to sort of explain where the Force came from, or at least how the Force behaves. Alien Exodus was a cancelled book in the Star Wars universe that was going to explain where humans appear in the Star Wars universe. Specifically, it was going to say that some thousands of years ago, humans were taken off of Earth as slaves, and later a whole war happened for human equality and liberation, to which they eventually became on par with everyone else and even powerful Force users. And while you may think, oh cool, that makes sense in the whole canon, if it does really take place a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, then it doesn't really make sense why humans would be there, but also know about things like Jesus. I know it's all just them being stupid, and this is people reading too far into it, but it's fun. But the Jesus stuff really messes with the whole lore. Bigger Luke refers to a theory that comparing Mark Hamill's height to Harrison Ford in A New Hope, there are scenes which Luke will be, quote, 1 to 5 centimeters taller periodically. Therefore, people believe that there are 2 Lukes that swap out with each other randomly, or that Ben Kenobi is using the Force to make Luke appear 5 centimeters taller for some reason. Now we are down to the Midnight Zone. Corellia is alive refers to Corellia the planet, which is the one which Han Solo is from. In the greater Star Wars mythos, Corellia is responsible for several natural expenditures and fuel sources, and it gives the theory that this planet, very similar to Coruscant, that's covered in cities and governments, is actually a living, breathing entity. The Jizz Age refers to the time before the Clone Wars, in which the galaxy was full of art and music and all that fun stuff. The reason it's called that is because Lucas, I believe, originally envisioned it as a combination between jazz and fizz, and no one corrected him. And Jizz is the genre which the Cantina Band in A New Hope and the band in Jabba's Palace in Return of the Jedi, it's the genre of music that they're officially listed as. Humans are bees is a very long theory I won't get too much into, but it goes into the idea that humans in the Star Wars universe are not actually humans, and instead, given things such as there are very few women in the original trilogy especially, and that there are several men who all fight in wars and whatever, that they are more akin to a sort of bee colony hive mind thing that assembles in certain areas and leaves to help the nest, and it's a whole big theory that you can get into. But it's basically an explanation to why these very human looking creatures could exist in a galaxy a long time ago, far, far away. Original editions never existed is speaking of the original Star Wars editions. As we know now, the Star Wars editions as we see them have been very heavily edited and layered over with CGI. However, this is saying that the original versions that Lucas supposedly destroyed in order to not let people watch them never existed in the first place, and that the original versions were edited over, and that this is simply people putting on nostalgia goggles and thinking that the old versions were better, and every version that you've seen since that is the original has purposefully had the new stuff edited out. In other words, Greedo always shot first, there was always weird CGI monsters, and there's always been more stormtroopers. Weezer discography parallelism is talking about the Weezer band's sort of rise and decline with their albums, and discography is a direct correlation to the Star Wars movies, and that Weezer purposefully modeled their entire band brand off of the Star Wars series. Virgin Smee versus Chad Vader is a sort of half joke that came off of the Chad Vader YouTube series, but is also in reference to the differences between Anakin or Vader and his mother Shmi, and how Shmi did things like dying for her son, and Vader did stuff like actively trying to murder his son. Real Book of the Wills is an interesting fan theory. For those that don't know, it's said in the Star Wars canon that the Book of the Wills is a written narrative of everything that ever happened in the Star Wars series, and as a matter of fact, everything that we're seeing now is a rendition or adaptation of the Book of the Wills. Therefore, all this did happen a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and what we're seeing is a visual adaptation of the written record. However, the real Book of the Wills is referring to the idea that whoever adapted this book into the real world wanted the heroes to win and wanted things to turn in their favor. So the Force is not actually an entity or thing that was in the original universe. It is instead the adapter or writer of everything that we're seeing, applying a sense of character protection to those that they want protected. In other words, the Force itself is creative liberties in order to tell a more engaging plot. Now we are to the final layer, the Abyss. Disney Purchase 1977 refers to in 1977, after the first New Hope came out, Disney approached George Lucas wanting to buy the series then. The theory says that they did buy the series, which all of the toys and advertisements and things that happened after New Hope was actually Disney working behind the scenes, and because at the time Disney was in a bit of a dry run, they didn't want their name attached to it and simply worked from the background, waiting until after the prequel trilogy came out in order to officially buy Star Wars off of George Lucas. The Last Jedi socks scene is speaking of a theory that was perpetuated by Mark Hamill that several of the scenes in The Last Jedi are supposed to be a metaphor for coitus. While this started as a joke, a lot of people ran with it, going as far as to make an entire diagram for the throne room fight scene in The Last Jedi, and how the emotions and character symbolism of the scene are all representative of smoochy time. Hyperspace war found footage is actually a concept that will be seen in my main conspiracy iceberg soon, but it's the idea that by looking through hyperspace or the plane above existence, that someone found recorded real-world video of the Star Wars events and battles, and that's what gave inspiration to the Star Wars canon. Boba Fett turns out it's a joke thrown at the bottom of the iceberg. I didn't know this doing my research, and I came across some of the worst Rule 34 ever, so once again, I played myself. Real Star Wars Holiday Special Never Captured is the theory that the already horrible Star Wars Holiday Special, which again is a very cheap Christmas ripoff just set in the Star Wars universe, is actually the not as bad version, and the original script was way worse and more preachy, and what we got was a watered down version. Yoda Species' true identity is referring to the fact that throughout the entire Star Wars canon, Yoda Species has never been named. However, a toy company that made a coin trading game back in the 1980s accidentally listed Yoda's species as the Lanix. It was then immediately said afterwards that this was a typo and wasn't meant to go on there, but there's nothing else that's the Lanix in the Star Wars canon, and it's a totally random thing that they did for seemingly no reason. Also, there are theories that Yoda's species, being one of the most powerful Force users in existence, would later survive on past the destruction of the Star Wars universe, go to a far-off planet, populate it, and then eventually adapt into humans. Finally, every episode is the same. This is stating that every episode of the Star Wars, all 9 of them, are the exact same story being told over and over again with only minor differences. This is not saying that they are necessarily bad, but that it is a repeating tale of good rising up against evil, being hurt, good winning, only for evil to rise up again and do it all over. While this is sort of the poetic look at it, there are other theories that every episode is literally the same, and every difference that you can remember is simply being zapped into your brains by the combined might of George Lucas and Disney. Yeah, you thought the CIA were scary. You clearly never met this old man in glasses. And that's it for the Iceberg. I hope you enjoyed. I had fun doing this. Like I said earlier, the conspiracy iceberg gets a lot, especially when it's this hard to research at tier 6 now. And I wanted to make this because I thought it'd be fun, and hopefully you all enjoyed it. And as always, again, thank you for watching. Thank you to everyone for watching. A very special thank you to all of my subscribers. A huge thank you to all of my Patreons. I really couldn't do this without you guys. And a massive thank you to my top tier patrons. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Pef. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Publius. Thank you, Saucy. Thank you, Phasia. And thank you, Steven. You all really are the best. And when I say I can't do this without you, I mean it. It's so mind-blowing that people enjoyed this enough to actually, like, put their foot down and donate towards it. And it's so humbling, and it means the world. Thank you. Tier 6 of the Iceberg coming out soon, as well as the deeper dive on the Denver airport, which is, again, thank you, what the patrons voted on. And that'll do it for this one. I will see you all in the next video. And as always, thank you for watching. Bye.